Hello, everyone. Welcome back into MLS Digest. I'm Camille, your host. We're here to preview Week 20 of the MLS season. We finally return after a bit of a break after we had a bye week the past weekend, and the MLS schedule doesn't actually stop for anything, as we know, with the Club World Cup and Gold Cup going on. Both of those group stages wrapping up, but now we have an 11-game slate this Wednesday, June 25th, and with the Sounders and LAFC getting eliminated, I'm pretty sure they'll be in action for Week 21, and Inter Miami advancing to the round of 16, and they'll face PSG, so they'll probably be joining those other two very, very quickly. But regardless, it's a pretty packed slate, but still for this one, with those group stages still wrapping up, there's a lot of players still on international duty for the teams playing. And so once again, we have to monitor those types of things. But it's good to be back previewing the slate and the league. And it should be a pretty good return in terms of the matchups we're about to see. Maybe it might not be full strength versus full strength, but I like the matchups on paper. So let's get into everything you need to know for Week 20 with lineups, predictions, and some best bets. Before we do that, please make sure to like this video below and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And let's just get right into it. So the first matchup on the slate is the Crew taking on Atlanta. And the Crew finally turned around some really bad form before this mini break by beating the Whitecaps, giving the Whitecaps just their second loss of the season, I believe. But obviously, of course, that slate back a week and a half ago, Week 19, was also with a lot of teams missing players due to these other competitions going on. And this is going to be the same case for both teams, especially the Crew, with they're still going to have their third choice goalkeeper. You still have players like Arvston and Amundsen out for different reasons, whether that be injury or Gold Cup. And for Atlanta as well, they did play in that in the past slate, which was a bit limited in terms of the matchups, and they got bounced by New York City 4-0. And, you know, missing players, of course, but New York City is a pretty average side. And in general, of course, Atlanta has been very good, but they're going to be missing Fortune and Muyumba. Fortune, I think it's looking like it's going to be a very long-term injury, so that's a really big concern for them in that midfield, because the rest of those players, Click, Sleesh, like, I don't know how much defensive coverage you're going to get from the pair. Sleesh is obviously going to sit back a bit more, but the depth is really being tested. And then Derek Williams is injured, and he's going to be out, so you're also going back to probably like Abram. And, this Atlanta side is just not good. It's not meshing. They're losing to bad teams, and I don't see a route where this is, getting figured out. But at the same time, the Crew have been really giving up goals, even in that win, giving up the goal to a really thin Vancouver side. And you have to favor the Crew at home, I feel like. It's just not a match I really want to get involved with in terms of a bet, just because of some of these matchups really have too many people out for me to have a clear kind of angle. But I feel like there should be goals in this one, and the Crew will just get by a really, really poor Atlanta team in terms of just the chemistry, the morale, and at home the Crew should do the business. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Crew win. Next up, it's Montreal hosting Cincinnati, and Montreal got just its second win of the season, beating Houston out of nowhere. And Cincinnati as well turned around some very bad form and beat the previously not unbeaten fully, but on a very long unbeaten streak, the New England Revs 1-0 on the road. And that's a really good win, especially after losing Haglund with that kind of rib injury. And then also you have Miles Robinson out for since he's still in Gold Cup. And obviously USA's through to the round of quarterfinals. But for Montreal as well, they're missing a couple players due to Gold Cup. Sealy, Waterman, Saliba, Vrioni seemed to get injured in that last matchup, but it's been some time. It's just that the status report is still pretty much questionable, and we don't really know. But regardless, they still have other players who aren't missing that have been injured, and such as Duke. Clark has gotten back a couple of games, but this Montreal side is as bad as the record suggests. And their 2 wins have come against NYC and Houston on the road. And Houston, like I've talked about, has just had so many none of their results have made sense because the result never compares to what you would expect going into that game. And this Montreal team still hasn't won at home. Cincinnati, I think this was a really good time to have this bit of a break because they had that really bad form, and defensively they were really, really leaky because of those injuries and absences I mentioned. And it seems like Kubo should be on track to finally be getting back because his injury has kind of rolled on for longer than I think anyone expected. So that offers, obviously, of course, another good option to play with Evander and Denke. But once again, Cincinnati just has a lot more talent in this one, and I think they're going to get right. This team is elite. They have an elite coach by MLS standards, of course, and I think this price here for our first best bet, I'm taking Cincinnati money line. I think the price is just really, really good. This is going to be one of those games affected by the heat wave in the U.S. at the moment. There's going to be a lot of those games in this midweek slate, so watch out for those. I'll get into that in some other matchups, of course, as we roll along, but this one should be, some good weather. And I'm backing the far better team, and I think this break, like I said, is really going to pay dividends for the Cincy team to refresh and get back into that type of supporter shield, running the table type of mode. Moving on to another Eastern matchup, it's the Revs hosting Nashville. Nashville in the midst of a really good unbeaten run, and the Revs just had their, I think it was 9 or 10 games, or maybe I don't even remember. But there's been so many teams with these long unbeaten runs, especially in the East. It's been like the Revs, Nashville, Orlando, and so on. But the Revs got it snapped, losing to Cincy at home after most of the season. I think they've played 75% of their games on the road. So at home, though, they haven't, been on that same level overall. And they're not really missing anyone due to the international stuff going on. But Langoni and Campagna, who have been out for several weeks now, it seems like they're inching closer. But there's no true, evidence that they're going to get starts here or, make the bench or anything like that, the latter is what I would assume would happen if they are able to go here. And then for Nashville, when they're missing Walker Zimmerman, they're just simply a far worse defensive team. I mean, that's just the facts. And then you're missing Schaffelberg, who, of course, is a great option for this attack. But regardless, this attack has been humming. The midfield, of course, has been, one of the best in the system Callahan's running. And who knows what this break will do to some teams' momentum, right? It could really hurt teams who were doing well and vice versa. But this is one that it just feels really, really tight. The Revs, of course, are really, really good defensively. Nashville really dictates the ball with possession, but New England can sit in. And if that has to be at home, I feel like they will do it. And I just don't see these two teams being separated at the moment. But with Zimmerman out, I think each team can get one in. And I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Next up, it's Toronto versus the Red Bulls. And Toronto is one of the worst teams in the league. The Red Bulls, very inconsistent team, beating Charlotte and Atlanta in back-to-back weeks. And I know Atlanta's been bad, but they beat them after Atlanta beat Orlando and Cincy 2 weeks prior. And then they lose on the road to Austin, who's also been it's been hard for them to score. So this is a matchup where it's been played already, right? And the Red Bulls won at home 2-1. A penalty for the Red Bulls was part of the difference in that game. Forsberg got both goals in that one. And Toronto especially has just been abysmal at home. Like, outside of that 6-1 win at Montreal, when Montreal got a red card in 20 minutes, there's not much to really like about this Toronto side, who is also missing so many players due to Gold Cup for the Canada team especially. And then Bernadeschi is dealing with a bit of a knock from last game, so we'll see if he's good to go here. But for the Red Bulls, you have Stroud suspended in midfield. Harper got injured, an attacking option, which they're really limited on at the moment with a bunch of young guys either being also hurt or I think Bogat should be back because Poland got knocked out of the under 21 Euros already. Didn't make it past the group stage, so I'm assuming he's an option for this one since he'll probably have like a full week ahead of time to get going. But regardless, the line for this game is pretty spot on in terms of the total goals. It's very, very low. And that's just what I see. I mean, especially the Red Bulls, I just feel like they get these moments, right, from whether that be Forsberg or Choupo-Moting, but I just don't really see like clear patterns that have me trusting them, on a week-by-week basis. And I need that solid evidence that this team can string together like really good stretches of games and, especially against at least average opposition. But they already beat Toronto, and I just think they'll have enough, especially with everyone who Toronto is missing at the moment, to just come in there and add to their misery. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Red Bulls win. It's the Fire hosting the Union, and for the second best bet, I'm going with the Fire team total over 1.5. It's at -120. Their money line is like plus 120-ish, plus 115, depending on where you look. And the Fire usually have goals in their games, right? The Union are among, I'm pretty sure they're first in the East, right? At the moment, this break has kind of made some things slip from my mind, but the Union are going to be missing still a lot of players due to these international tournaments, especially Gold Cup. You have Andre Blake out. You have Glavinovic still injured. You have Jean-Jacques, who is on Haiti. Obviously, their game against USA was Sunday. This is going to be this coming Wednesday. And he hasn't been in the injury report at the moment. So I feel like he's going to make this squad, but he has been playing a lot of minutes, right? He played 3 group stage games in the past 3 weeks or whatever it is. So, or sorry, like 1.5 weeks. So that's even worse. And so even if he makes this, I think he's going to be on the bench. And then you still have Harriel out, Quinn Sullivan out, and now you have Ty Baribo out, who's on Israel duty, but he's picked up some sort of knock. He's going to be out for like 3 or 4 weeks. And then Ura also dealing with injury. So you have your 2 top strikers out and just other players just in every section behind that, key starters out. So while I'll never trust the Fire to hold a clean sheet, especially this season, because it's only been done once, and that was the 0-0. I want to avoid, right, taking them just straight up. Because the Union can still do things, right? They still have a well-run system with Carnell, and the Fire can probably concede to them still because there's no Chris Brady, and that back line is just very, very thin, and the Fire are just all gas, no brakes. So I'm going to trust the attack to turn things around at home. They haven't been good at home by any stretch of the imagination. They've largely gotten their points on the road. But I think if they want the win here, they're going to have to score 2 anyways, and I'm just protecting against the other side of the ball. You could say, why aren't you taking the full game over? It's just that, I'm not as high on the Union this week because of all those players being out, but I still think they can probably get one in there. But I think the Fire have a clear advantage in this game, and they should be picking the Union apart and should have a full strength attack. We'll see if Zinkernagel gets back because he had a wedding. That's why he missed last week, or if he's going to be on like a honeymoon after that wedding, and how much this rest he's getting break is going to be. But regardless, you still have Kuipers, Gutierrez, Bamba, and Haile Selassie, who's been in really, really good form in the past 2 or 3 games. So I really like this play here, and the Fire, I think, get the win anyways, but we'll probably need to get it through. Moving on to the West, where we have Dallas taking on San Jose. And Dallas in some pretty good form coming off of that break, drawing the Union at home, where they've been really, really disappointing in comparison to last season, where on the road they were among the worst, like some really bad numbers. And this year they're doing really well on the road. But they host here after winning on the road in Kansas City 4-2, an explosion of goals there. San Jose getting that late draw at Portland, after a really kind of fiery type of effort to come back there, a place that's hard for teams to get points this season against that Timber side. And really, there's not much to worry about on Dallas's end in terms of health. The one center back, one of their main guys, has been out for a couple games now, so that's no surprise. And then for San Jose, it's really just Harks, who's been suspended from the last game, picking up that card. And then you still have Lopez and Sakiris still working their way back from injuries. And I don't know what the timeline yet is on that. I feel like Lopez should be kind of getting back here soon, but I feel like it hasn't been made clear. And San Jose, the numbers point towards just goals, right? Like every single game, it could just be an auto bet in that case. But Dallas at home, and just in general, right? They haven't been good at home. They don't keep a lot of the ball. And San Jose has also had some tendencies recently to play some really, maybe not non-high eventful games, but somehow they're just getting these kind of cookie-cutter draws, and most of them are low scoring. So I still kind of lean towards goals. I think this Musa Acosta chain can really be a battering ram against this Quakes defense. But on the other end, Dallas hasn't really been getting the wins at home. So this one feels like another draw to me, and I'm going to lean towards a 2-2 result. Here we got a cross-conference battle between KC and Charlotte. And Kansas City coming off 2 ugly wins at LAFC and against Dallas. Charlotte, as we know, is abysmal on the road. Has only gotten a couple of road wins, and those have come against the 2 Canadian teams. Or sorry, not the 2. There's 3 Canadian teams. But by the 2, I mean Toronto and the Montreal. And they just lost to the Union in a very rotated game on the last match week. And here they're going to be missing Tim Ream again and Ajamang due to being on USA's Gold Cup roster. Kansas City has a couple of injuries, but nothing that we don't really know about as far as from past weeks. And they're just really thin on the depth chart anyways in terms of just raw talent. It's been Joveljic really being one of the main goal scorers for them. And this is one of those games it'll be affected by the heat wave at the moment in the U.S. And it's going to be high 80s, almost 90 around game time still. And that's a big deal for these players. And I just think as well with Charlotte's struggles on the road and Kansas City's just, I know they've had some really high scoring games of late, but Charlotte on the road usually tends to, I feel like, get a little bit more pinned in. Kansas City does like to have the ball a little bit more. And as well, without Ajamang, I think the Charlotte attack, without that target man, is really going to be a hard watch. And I just don't see there being tons of goals in this one. I think the weather is going to affect this one as well. And so for the third best bet, I'm going with the under 3 at -114. So we're getting that push protection in case there's 3. But I just, Kansas City's attack is really not that good. They've been in much better form and just more competitive as well since Vermees got fired, of course. And we've seen some high-scoring games, yes. But that doesn't scare me from this game. Charlotte should struggle to score as well because of who they're missing. And I think their defense will turn things around under Dean Smith because they've been kind of the class of the league in that sense in the past year and a half. And they have been in some really rough form and, of course, are terrible on the road. But I don't think Kansas City is a team that is one of those teams that is going to make it, a really high-scoring type of game like these really good teams have against Charlotte, such as the Crew recently. So that's just where I'm looking at this game. I think we may see a bit of some disappointments because we've seen, especially in the Club World Cup as well and other Gold Cup, like the heat is really affecting these players, and it's reaching like really high record type of temperatures, and it's really going to slow down the pace of these games, which plays into, I feel like, Charlotte's favor defensively on the road where they've been lacking, and then with Kansas City, they kind of stall out in possession, I feel like, a little bit too much. They don't have that quality to break teams down like Charlotte on the road. So I like this. We get the push protection and hope this one is very uneventful. Moving on to the later part of the slate with mostly Western matchups. It's Minnesota hosting the Dynamo. Minnesota, after kind of proving in a sense that their style works, right? Not having the ball a lot against a team with a high possession rate against Seattle. They faced San Diego right after that, one of the other top teams in possession, and it got bounced. But on the other end, both teams were dealing with so many players out since it was the start of Gold Cup. And for Minnesota, that's been Oluwaseyi, St. Clair, Rosales. Those are three really key players in this team. Obviously, they still have Yeboah and wingback depth, which helps. But, you know, St. Clair is a top keeper in this league, and especially that Dreyer goal from like halfway. I mean, you know, that the Minnesota backup keeper got caught off his line. So that's all I'm going to say. But still, Minnesota at home against this Houston side that, like I've been trying to say, this Houston side is just unpredictable. They grind out some tough points somehow, and they've definitely gotten better since Linger joined, of course. But McGlynn's going to be out here. He's been a key cog in this team as far as ball progression and a couple of really good goals, of course. And I think Minnesota will get it done. It'll probably be like a 1-0, 2-0 type of deal. But they'll use their tactics effectively to counter, and with the extra rest, the replacements, even though they could be first team players anyways, if these main starters weren't there, right? They would be just fine. I think they'll do the job. And Houston, just really bad form right now, coming off those two terrible losses to two terrible teams. And yeah, I think probably Yeboah or like Ludd's going to be back now, because I think he was gone for that San Diego game due to some qualifiers, and they should be okay. I don't think it's going to be anything like too pretty or like a blowout, but I just don't think Houston will even find the back of the net in this one. So I'm going to say Minnesota by 1-0 or 2-0. Next up, it's St. Louis hosting Orlando. And for the finals best bet number 4, I'm going to go with the over 3 here at plus 103. Now, I have to say this is one of those games that it's going to be mid-80s or so around kickoff. Hopefully it'll cool down, but that definitely can be a factor here. And I'm still going to take this one just because I really think that the pace of this game will still be pretty high and will lead to some open chances, some spaces. Just these two teams, stylistically, I feel like, especially St. Louis, how they've kind of turned their maybe not form entirely around, but just the performances. I've been riding that wave recently, and it's kind of paid off, especially against the Galaxy. We had the over there, and that was a crazy shootout. And for Orlando, they have been a little bit more balanced. I will say they just got a win on the road at Colorado. Colorado is looking really, really poor right now. But of course, Orlando, as we know, I mean, they're used to this, type of heat anyways, for the most part. And just without Freeman and now with Schlegel being suspended, those are two key players on that back line as far as their defense goes. But everything else is perfect for Orlando, right? Atuesta is there, Araujo, so you still have that attacking, midfield presence. And then everyone else healthy, of course, Pasalic, Enrique, Ojeda. Like, this team is humming, but I think St. Louis on the home bump can also match that, and this can be something around like a 2-2. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep riding St. Louis's revival in terms of just being just a little bit more on the front foot of things. And I really like what the interim coach has been doing in terms of how he's been just the lineup like the formation, who he's been putting in with, especially Pompeu. He's a really fun player to watch, and even if Lewin and whoever, maybe Durkin even, because they're always, especially Lewin because of his personal matters, is always kind of questionable. I think the team has just been clicking a little bit more now, and Orlando can definitely get into some shootouts. So this should be one that I think breaks that kind of expectation of just the weather kind of impeding any type of really good play or sequences and high energy. I think we'll still have that, and maybe it'll take a little bit of time to get there, but I think we get 3 here at the minimum, and it's a really good price. So we might even see one team run away with it, I feel like, because Orlando can certainly also do that. But I'm just going to stick with the 3, and I think both score anyways. So this should be a shootout. Hopefully we get that. In one of the final few games of the night, it's a rematch of one of the Western Conference playoff games last year. It's the Rapids hosting the Galaxy, and the Rapids are on a 3-match loss streak. They're going to be missing Zach Steffen still, who got injured. And then the Galaxy in much better form, right? Because they finally got that first one against RSL and then played out to that really fun game against St. Louis on the road. And here they match up with a team in Colorado that's really out of form. They haven't been scoring many goals. They've been, shut out, honestly, too many times this season. And I feel like it's kind of all up for grabs here once again, as far as form goes, right? But the big thing for the Galaxy is that Fagundes is out. So, we're going to see if Royce can kind of do more than he's been doing. Who else can maybe step up in terms of that attacking aspect of the midfield, as well as just the work rate? Because we know Royce is not going to get back, but, as far as the attack goes, the Rapids are healthy, and I don't want to say this every week, but I don't know. I just feel like it can do more. It has potential on paper, but it's just not clicking at the moment. So this can also be a game for Colorado where they kind of feel better about themselves, just because the Galaxy have been so bad all season, regardless of the past 2 games. So I think this is anyone's guess, and because of that, I just see this being maybe a little bit more low scoring, but I don't see either keeping each other, out of the back of the net. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. To wrap up Wednesday's slate, it's a very tasty matchup between the Whitecaps and San Diego, both in the top of the standings in the West. And unfortunately, though, this game is riddled by the fact that, a lot of players are missing because of Gold Cup and so on. Eda Kugube as well, getting pretty much a season-ending injury, which is a terrible news for the Whitecaps. But you have Ahmed Berhalter, Nelson, White, all out for Gold Cup action, as well as Ryan Gauld still out with the injury he's been dealing with for months now. And then on San Diego's side, you have, of course, De La Torre and Godoy out, and they're both going to be going through to the knockouts of Gold Cup. Lozano's dealing with a bit of a knock from last game. And then also McNair, their center back. So, honestly, 2 teams who love to have the ball, who love to be very straightforward with their possession, and, are really dangerous in waves and attack and can pick you apart at the same time. But the quality is not going to be there, right? So, I don't know if this gets out of hand because maybe defensively both aren't, as in top health at the moment, and the replacements will still have enough. Or if the other will be true is just that, the same quality, the same type of patterns of play, because of who's out there, you won't see that. and so it's going to be a bit of a stalemate. And also, I forgot to mention, I think it's Nelson and Sabby. One is also injured, or sorry, not Nelson. Sabby got married as well, similar to Zinkernagel. So he missed the last game. We'll see if he's back or if he's like honeymooning or whatever. And if he's out, then that's really just Rios and literally you don't have wingers. So it's going to be interesting to see what these lineups actually are. But on, the expectation is that it's really going to be some thrown together type of lineups. And I just, unfortunately, that's just part of why it's unfortunate that, this is still going through these tournaments, because we want to see these teams at full strength and all that. And this would be a really, really fun matchup to watch. It still will be anyways, because of course the Whitecaps don't make excuses for themselves. We saw them crush the Sounders after getting the food poisoning or whatever after that huge disappointment in Champions Cup final. So, Whitecaps at home especially should still have the edge regardless of any type of roster info. But I am going to go with a 1-0 Whitecaps win, as maybe unlikely or ugly as that sounds. Thanks for tuning in again, everyone. Glad to be back with the previews. We're back in the swing of things. I'll probably be putting out a video talking about the MLS teams' performances at Club World Cup whenever Miami is out of it. Maybe they can go on continue this magical run, but, facing PSG is impossible almost for anyone. Botafogo did it, but, we'll see if they can move on any further. And regardless, we'll have week 21 on Saturday. And the Sounders and LAFC both scheduled with matches there, so I don't think those will be moved, because they'll have about 3-4 days of rest from their last group stage games anyways. So unless I've missed something, I think those haven't been moved since they haven't advanced to the knockout rounds of the Club World Cup. And we should see almost a full slate of games barring Miami. So it should be about 13 or 14 games. And good luck with the bets this weekend if you're tallying. And hopefully enjoy some MLS action and just enjoy this summer of soccer as we've been getting into the swing of things with all these competitions. It's been really fun to watch, in my opinion, with especially the Club World Cup. You could say what you want, but I think there's been some pretty interesting matchups and storylines all around. Once again, please make sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you all ahead of week 21.